Hello, folks. This is Rebecca Adams with Free to Soar, and I have my wonderful co-host Becky Vermeer with me. I just love
Hi.
having her on here. Becky is the executive director for the Crisis Center in Taney County. I always want to make sure I got that right.
You are always right when you say it, too.
Okay,
I'm
good.
guilty as charged.
Okay. And Becky has been there, I don't remember if I mentioned it, almost 25 years. She just does an amazing job. She and her staff do. I came through there about 20 years ago and just, oh my goodness, it was a real beginning to my healing journey to a life of freedom. It really was.
That's awesome.
And just
so
real
happy to
quick, I
hear
just
that.
want to let you know that I named my TV program after my book, which is also called Free to Soar. And it has more than just my story in it. It has every kind of abuse defined with examples, as well as places that you can go, resources for if you're really wanting to get free or you want to look into it a little further for somebody else that you know.
That is a must read. You should say that too. That is a must read.
Well, I'm not going to say that about my own book, but I appreciate that, Becky. You're
I'll
awesome.
say it.
Okay. Thank you so much. So Becky and I have finished up talking about the abuse inventory that they use at the Crisis Center. And that was extremely powerfully impactful in my life to do that inventory. So we're pretty sure we've pretty much thoroughly covered that one. In the back of my book, as I said, there are other kinds of abuse that are not on that inventory. And we just wanted to make sure that we covered these as well, because these are very valid forms of abuse. I know that just about everybody, it seems like I talk to, they think domestic violence is always the physical abuse. It's part of it, but it's not all of it. Do you want to speak to that before we start our topic tonight?
Well, just the main thing that I would say about that is you're exactly right. And the challenge is these other types of abuse that we talk about are the ones that you can't see. And so if you're an abuser, they're the ones that you're going to want to use because they're much easier to hide. And your victim knows that the victim is experiencing them, but the general public couldn't look at the victim and say, oh, well, she's obviously being abused. And so they're very powerful if you're trying to maintain power and control, but you don't want people to know about it.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Very well said. Well, tonight we're going to cover one of them that is a hot button for me that I could probably talk for an hour on this topic. Excuse me, and that is financial abuse. So I'm not going to read the entire list to you like I did with the abuse inventory, but just to bring out some that I experienced and that were real triggers for me. Causing financial debt was one that, excuse me, my dad had us in so much debt. My mom told me years later, she said that there were times that she didn't know where the next meal was coming from to feed the 5 of us. She felt she had no other option. She went to work and she ended up working 2 and 3 jobs trying to pay off his debts, which his debts were to his own mother and to some very dear friends of theirs. Can you speak to that? Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, one of the things that instantly comes to mind when you talk about that, and one of the things that we talk about frequently as far as financial abuse goes, is definitely destroying a person's credit. And so we'll see so many times someone will come and stay in the shelter setting. What they're really trying to accomplish for themselves is safe, affordable housing. If you apply for an apartment anywhere, if you apply for a rental place anywhere, if you try to buy a home anywhere, what's the very first thing they do? The very first thing they do is they're going to run a credit check on you. It's a very powerful tactic of abuse to destroy someone's credit. And so what you'll see is situations where the woman in the home of the abuser, all the credit cards are put in her name. or primarily that. All of the credit cards are put in her name. If there's any owned property, that's put in her name sometimes. If there's any outstanding loans, that's put in her name. But then what you don't see behind that is all of those things are put in her name, so the bills are coming to her. And frequently you'll have the abuser in the home be the one who says, well, it's my money and I'll do with it what I will. I'm the one that has the job. You're not allowed to work outside of the home. It's my money. I will use it for what I want. And so those bills that are all in that victim's name, they don't get paid. And so you've got bill collectors chasing you, your credit is destroyed, you may have high amounts charged to credit cards. So if you do try to leave and you do try to secure housing for yourself, you're not going to, because you're not a safe risk, for example, to rent to. It's a very strong tactic to keep somebody in that abusive relationship.
As you have said before, it's purposeful, intentional.
Definitely. Yeah.
Goodness. I know that that was one reason that my mom gave, excuse me, allergies. It's one reason my mom gave finally for convincing me to file for divorce after I'd left him. She said, well, he could easily take out a loan and put your name on it and you wouldn't be any the wiser, and he could mess up your credit score. And you know, that's exactly what ended up happening. He had already taken out a loan for what I don't even know. And he had put my name on that loan as well.
The other challenging thing that goes with that is, depending on what state you live in, I happen to be in Missouri, and so I know that in the state of Missouri, Missouri is considered to be what's called a joint property state. And so if you're married, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whose name is on the debt. It doesn't matter who that bill is going to. Both people in that marriage relationship are as equally responsible. And so even in that, like if you're with an abuser who says, well, it's my house, so it's in my name, it's my car, so it's in my name. If you try to divorce as the victim, you are just as financially responsible for all of that debt, regardless of whose name it's in. And again, I think that varies state by state. And so there's wisdom in knowing, how does your state look at marital property?
That's very good to know, because, excuse me, when we finally did go through the divorce, he was in a different state than I was in where I filed. And so I was not responsible for any of his debts, which is really good.
Yes.
That was very, very good.
Yeah, thankfully.
One of the things on this list is lose or quit his job, or cause the victim to lose or quit her job. Now, we were both in agreement that I would stay home with the kids, so I had no problem with that. However, on the flip side, what that meant was that we were practically destitute. He had no experience to get a high-paying job by any means. And so we were left, well, I was left trying to manage the money and try to make it stretch. And I always have to stop and laugh when I think about this one story. So I had been managing the money because he felt I was better at it than he was. So that's fine. All right, so I'll manage the money. I stretched it as far as I could. And as I told you earlier, at one point, I was having to feed a family of 5 on $20 a week. It was just insane. You eat a lot of eggs and soup, let me tell you.
Maybe macaroni.
Yes, exactly. So I took this about as long as I could. And he had a couple of things that he liked to collect. And I think we all like things that we like to collect. That's fine. But when you want these things up and above what the family's needs are, then you're out of balance. And you are not taking care of your family, bottom line. And it was to the point that I couldn't even afford to buy underwear for the kids or I when they started to wear out. So I finally took my worst pair, and I cut them up and made patches, and I patched my underwear and I patched the kids' underwear because
Wow.
I had no other option. Yeah.
Wow.
Um,
Resourceful.
yes, resourceful. Well, so that kind of gives you an idea of where we were
Mhm.
financially. Well, at one point we had it, and I had it marked in the checkbook. Yes, we have this amount of balance, but really that only means we have $10 wiggle room, because that is earmarked for the house payment, or that is earmarked for utilities or whatever. So more than once, he saw that, picked up the checkbook and went, okay, well then I could go and get that. What are you going to get? Oh, nothing. Then he'd come back with something that he'd paid more than what we had wiggle room for. And I kept telling him, stop it, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the checkbook over to you, and I'm not going to help you balance the checking account. I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be a resource for you to come to when you don't know what to do. Well, he didn't believe me. So the third time I had it. He came home, he paid $20 for something that he collected. And I said, I told you we didn't have that money. At the time, I think we had like $5 or $10 wiggle room in there. And I said, I told you we didn't have the money. Oh, well, yeah, we had X and X amount of money. And I said, it shows you right in there, and you know how to read my markings. That is for whatever it was at that time, house payment, whatever. Oh, well, I didn't know that, with this smirky little look on his face. And I said, fine. And I marched into the desk and I pulled out the checkbook and I slapped it on his chest. And I said, this is all yours. I still laugh when I think about this story. And I slapped it on his chest. I can still hear that now. And I said, this is all your responsibility, and I'm not touching it. I'm not helping you with any part of it at all. Do you understand me?
That was pretty bold, I gotta say.
Listen, that only came from sheer anger, okay, and
Yes.
frustration, because I had no backbone. I really didn't. And he was shocked. He didn't think I really meant it. I meant it, and I kept my word.
Yeah.
And it was hilarious. The next morning, he told me, he said, before I went to bed, I was looking at our finances, and he said, I don't think I slept at all last night. And I said, really? I said, that's funny, because I slept like a baby.
Oh, that's good.
So, you can have a little fun with that too.
Right?
Yeah. So he felt I was controlling all the money all that time, and that he didn't have any. But yet, after I left him, I had more than one friend that told me, they said, when you guys were in your worst financial state, I saw him in the work vehicle, and he had bought some fast food and was sitting there eating this huge hamburger. And they said, I knew you were at home with the kids and there was hardly anything for you to eat. Yeah. So he was busted, didn't know it, but he was. Okay, here's one. Refused to work and make her support the family. Now, he did not make me go out and support the family, but what he did was he refused to work in his own bullheaded way, okay? His mother could have gotten him a job at a local fast food place, and she offered numerous times. Nope, nope, I'm waiting for a position. We can't live on that. Well, at least that way your wife could stay at home with the kids while you're working, and then you can still be looking for other work. Well, that doesn't leave me any time to look for work. So the bottom line is, the first 10 years we were married, a third of that, 3 years cumulatively, not all at once, but cumulatively, 3 years he was out of work in the first 10 years.
Wow. That's insane.
It was insane. It truly was. I had
Yeah.
somebody who sent me a message tonight that said she had seen one of the videos that I had done, and she said, I can still remember coming into your house, coming over to visit you. He was out of work, but he's sitting there on the couch and he's watching Jeopardy on TV. And he said, and she said, you know, so she was seeing some of it right then and there.
Right.
Okay, so he thinks that nobody saw, nobody noticed, um, but they did. People did. They knew what was going on.
Yeah.
So essentially, what he was doing was he was refusing to work. Now, it was during a really bad time economically for the country. Yes, I'll give him that. But he still could have gotten a job at that fast food place.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Not allow money to be spent on her, the children, or her family, either for necessities or gifts. Okay, so it was a little bit of that. Um, I'm trying to decide on which story to tell on that one. But essentially, I think I can just go back to the story about our clothes. I can remember when one of our sons was a teenager, and I just happened to walk into his room. I left that as their territory, and I didn't barge in on them or anything like that. And he just happened to have his closet open, and I was mortified. That's all the clothes my child had. It was, I don't even think there were 15 things hanging on the hanger,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
inexcusable.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing about that, in the setting at the shelter, we don't necessarily have a confidential location. And so honestly, if you want to find our shelter program, you can find it. And so because of that, there are times where we'll actually have abusers show up on our property. And so it never ceases to amaze me, because when they do show up on our property, 9 times out of 10, the person who shows up is very concerned about the person who's in shelter. And a funny one, funny, ironic, maybe funny, haha, maybe both. There was a particular scenario of a woman that was staying in shelter, and the abuser drove up, and I happened to be outside. And so I walked over and I said, "Is there anything I can help you with?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm looking over there, and that's my wife's vehicle." And I looked and I said, "I'm not sure whose car that is." And I really didn't know, honestly. So I wasn't even being dishonest. I didn't know whose car it was. And he said, "Well, it's my wife's. And so I know that she's staying here." And I said, "Answer that we have to give. I'm sorry, I can't confirm or deny her presence in our shelter." And he said, "Well, I'm just really concerned that she doesn't have any money to put gas in the car, or has have any money for diapers for the baby." And I said, "Well, if you want to write down a phone number and leave a message, I'll post a message on our message board, but I can't tell you if I know, who this person is." And so he drove off. And the woman had actually been inside and had seen him there. And so she came over to talk to me, and she said, what did he want?" And I said, "Well, honestly, he said he wanted to make sure that you had money for gas for the vehicle and money for diapers for the baby." And she actually laughed, and she said, "I think that's the very first time he has ever offered gas for the vehicle or diapers for the baby." And so even in that, you talk about, well, you can hear what she's saying, and what she's saying is he withheld those finances from her and her child when she needed them. But again, we've talked so many times in the past, the public person and the private person are two different people. When this public person comes to the property, very first thing he wants to do is give her money.
Oh yeah, and look good. See, that's
Mhm,
that's the thing I pick up on, because my
mhm.
ex was really good at that too. He wanted to look good in your eyes. Oh, I'm so
Right.
concerned.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of expression he kept giving to people after I left him, was
Yeah.
that, oh, I'm just so concerned, and I just don't know how she's making it, and um, I want to be reconciled. That was his word. We won't even go there. um, but yeah, he was really good about spending money on himself. So towards the end, probably about the last couple of years I was there, I just lit into him one more time. He came home with some clothes for him. Well, I'm the one that works outside the home. I have to look professional. And I just lit into him. And I told him how that we were not being cared for, and we were not getting what we needed. And I
Right.
said, how come next time, what about next time when you go to the store and you go shopping for yourself, why don't you buy something for one of us for a change? So just to try to smear it in my face, he came back. And the next time, and he had, he knew I loved hoodies. I just love hoodies. So he had bought 2 black hoodies. One was fuzzy and soft, and another was just a plain hoodie. And he bought a third item. I don't remember what it was. And he said, here, you can pick whatever you want. I said, well, thank you very much. I said, yes, I can use that. So I picked the one I wanted, and then one of the boys took the other one and, you know, called it good. But he knew what he was doing, that he was centering all the finances and all the purchases around him to make him look really good. Bottom line.
Yeah, and so like the rule of thumb that we talk about when we talk about this and trainings and such is, it's my job, I'm the one that has the money, so it's my money. Or then the converse of that, I expect you to go out and work and bring home the money, but when you bring home the money, it's my money. And so there's that resounding theme of, it doesn't matter who's earning it and who's bringing it home, it's my money. That sense of entitlement that abusers wear like a badge of honor.
Exactly. Here's one that really hits the nail on the head. I had a relative who would periodically give some of us money, just maybe it'd be a holiday, maybe not, and just write us a check and give us some money. He would always manipulate and, well, you know, we really need that money for the cable bill, or we really need that money for the electric bill, or we really need that money to go towards the house payment. So there was one point where I had a car accident, and of course it really shook me up. Well, when we got the settlement, I was the one who was at home. I got the mail. I ran to the bank and I opened up my own savings account in my name only. And my friend was at the bank and she was getting ready to put his name on it. And I just about bit her head off, which is not my my way of doing things. And I said, no. And then I kind of backed off on myself, like, don't bite her head off. And she kind of looked at me funny. And I said, no, I don't want his name on there at all. And she just got very quiet. And she said, okay. Well, I used that money to start me off after I left him. I had that money. Now, when he found out what I had done, I was scared to death to tell him. I really thought that possibly the physical abuse would start at that point. I was terrified, absolutely terrified. He was livid. Oh, he was so angry. Well, I don't think that husbands and wives should have separate accounts from each other. That's just not right. And he just starts off on his little sermon. And I said, well, you always try to take the money that's given to me to the point that now that relative writes the check to me, not to both of us. They see what you're doing. And that took a lot of guts for me to say that.
Yeah. Really. You know, in a former episode, we had talked about that word empowerment, and what you just defined by example is a huge example of what empowerment looks like. Okay. You took that power back. You took that power back for yourself. You made a plan to protect yourself and to move past the abuse, and you were able to do it. So that's exactly what empowerment is.
Okay, I didn't know. See, I'm learning too. I continue to learn while we have these conversations. That's really awesome, because we do need to have a couple of shows about empowerment too. I know we've discussed having that as well, so we will add that to the list. So folks, we have a lot to cover yet, and we're out of time. So happens all the time, doesn't it, Becky? Every time we sit down to do this.
The same thing I always say, stay tuned.
Yes, stay tuned, exactly.
More to come.
Yes, there is. Oh my goodness, there's so much more to come. Becky and I have talked about it, and there's a minimum of 10 years worth of information that we can talk about and give to you folks to educate you, because that's our passion. It's our passion to educate you. Any final words, Becky?
Actually, no. I appreciate the fact that you were willing to make yourself vulnerable and share a piece of your story with us. I think that's, again, further empowerment and an example for us to follow. And I do feel like bringing awareness to that topic of financial abuse is so very important. If you're trying to leave an abuser, what's the one way to keep somebody under your thumb, so to speak, is make sure they have no access to funds. So there is one final thing that I wanted to say about it that we need to pay attention to. When you're living with someone who is an abuser, and financial abuse is their chosen tactic, it's a way to keep you under their thumb. It's a way to keep you in the home. And so if you can't leave the home and secure housing for yourself, you can't get out. And so I tell people all of the time, coming to a domestic violence shelter is someone's last choice, not their first. If you have other resources, if you have family members that you can go to, if you have financial resources, whatever that may be, you're not going to come to a shelter. And so we see examples frequently of people coming to stay into our shelter program who might be credit rich but money poor. There's a reason for that. If you don't have any money, you can't access any other resources. You can live on a credit card as much as you want, but if you're trying to leave an abuser, you can't even go to a hotel and use a credit card, because that abuser can track your whereabouts and know where you are. And so there's a huge safety risk associated with that. And so I think as we end the topic of financial abuse, it's really important to say that again, there's so many different ways that finances can be controlled by the abuser.
It's a really good point. And I want to add to that, after I got out and my friends began to find out what I had been through, and then after they read my book, I can't tell you how many friends said, "Oh, I wish I had known." And I said, "I thought you knew." And every time the answer is, "No, I had no idea. I knew something just wasn't quite right, but I didn't know what it was. If I'd known you could have come and stayed with us, I wouldn't have let him do anything to you." And so you'd be surprised how many people would be willing to help you. You might just need to take that risk and talk to somebody. If you have no financial options and you don't even have a way to get to a shelter, well, you can do a 911 call or a 211 call. Those would definitely work. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can always talk to somebody that you know deep down you can trust them. You never know, they might say, "I'll let you live with us for a while."
I will say about that, though, very, very briefly, make sure it is someone that you can trust. Because when an abuser who's motivated to maintain power and control over you, if you walk outside of the home and you tell your story to another person, you're trying to take his power and control away. And so telling your story is not always the safest choice. And so it definitely needs to be someone that you can trust, someone who will keep your information confidential and will not go tell other people, and definitely won't go and tell the abuser.
Thank you for clarifying that. You always are so good at balancing out things and clarifying. I appreciate you so much, Becky.
I try.
Well, folks, we are out of time, and stay tuned for next time when we tackle domestic violence.
Bye-bye.
Bye.